Hey, how's it going? And today we are basically doing 3 tutorials in one, and this is creating a widget blueprint timer using the game mode base. And I know that sounds like a lot, but there is a lot to know in here, and this is kind of a cool thing because it's essentially a timer. It's not relying so much on the blueprint third person, although we are in the third person template. But what I really want to show you is that you can build a lot of your game functionality and put it in a game mode base instead of in the blueprint third person template. And I know in my past tutorials I've often put the game functionality in with the blueprint third person, but I want to show you that you don't need to do that, and it might be better to put it in the game mode base. Whatever game functions that you want to add to your game. So what this looks like is this is just a simple custom made timer. So I'll hit play here and you'll see it right up there on the top. So we custom designed that interface right there, that image right there, using in-house assets, relatively simple to do. And then after 30 seconds, the game ends. And down here you'll see we have our new widget blueprint and we have our game mode base. And what's going to happen is as soon as we hit 0, the game is over. And that's it. I'm going to try to take this in some sections, and we're going to start with creating our new widget blueprint. Then we're going to create the game mode base, and then we'll piece everything together from there. So anyway, I'll be back in just a minute and we'll get started on this. Okay, so I'm back and we're starting from scratch, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our widget blueprint. So I'm just on the content folder level right here, so I'm just going to right click, go user interface, and go widget blueprint, and we'll go user widget, and I'll just call this WBP timer, and we'll double click into this and it docks automatically. And we're going to create the widget interface first. There's quite a few settings in here, so let's get started on that. We'll go first and get a canvas panel, and we're going to drag this into the scene like that. Then we're going to come up here, and where it says fill screen, we're going to switch this to custom, and then we're going to change our size to 120, tab to 120. And then if I right click, I can just center this in the screen a little bit better. And we can just leave this called canvas panel 138 or whatever your default name is. Everything on here we can just leave the default settings as they are. The only thing we're going to do is on the Y, we need to bring it up a little bit, so this will put it at the top center. So I'm just going to reposition it again. And that's all we need to do with our canvas panel. There's 3 more components that we need, and they're a little bit more, nothing too bad. So we'll just search for text here, and I'm going to drag this on top of the canvas panel so it's a child. I can just leave this called text block. And there's a few settings that we need to do in here, so let's kind of walk through them. There's actually about 10 of them. So this is not a variable. For our anchor, we're going to put it right in the center there. For our size on the X, we're going to change this to 255. We'll leave the size on the Y the same. The alignment's going to be 0.5, tab 0.5. And we do want this size to content, and we need to clear out these offsets here, this position 0 to 0. And that should put it right in the center of the screen. On the Z order, we're going to put it to 1. The tint and color, we're going to leave it at white. We're going to change the font size to 50. We're going to get rid of where it says text block and put in a 0 there. And I think that's pretty much it, except on the shadow offset, and this will be nice because this will give it a more of a 3D quality. So we're just going to offset the shadow here a little bit. We're going to go 1.1. You'll see here on the shadow color we have it set to black, but you'll notice there's no alpha on here, so we'll just type in a 1 there, and that will give us our shadow. And there's the justification, we're going to put that to the center. And as far as I know, that's all the settings that we need to do. If you want to get a look at it, you can click on the canvas panel and you can see what it's looking like right there. So that's that. Now we're going to search for a image here, and we'll go image, and we're going to drag this onto the canvas panel like that. And I'm just going to call this circle outer, and click on that. And there's just a few settings on here that we need to do. Similarly to what we just did, we're going to set this to the center here. We're going to zero out our X and Y positions here. We'll set our alignment to 0.5, tab 0.5. And for our size on this, we want this to be 100 by 100. Like that, so you can see it filling the square. And on our tint here, we're going to change the color to a gray. So let's double click on the header. And I should mention on some of this, feel free to make adjustments. You don't have to follow this exactly, whatever looks right to you. These are just settings that I'm kind of throwing together here. So we're just going to bring this down to a gray, like right about there. Like I said, there's no right or wrong necessarily on that. And then on our alpha, we're just going to drop this a little bit down to 0.75 and go OK. Make sure those changes took. And now we're going to draw this not as an image but as a rounded box, and you'll see we get this nice circle in there. And here for our outline, you'll notice that the alpha is 0, which means it's not going to show at all, but the color is black. So we're going to change this to a 1 because we want to see the color. And then here on the width, we're just going to put this to a 2. And you see how we get this nice circle here? And honestly, if you just wanted to stop here, that could be good enough. But if we want to make it look even a little bit more sophisticated, we can add an inner circle. We don't have to, but we're going to go ahead and just do that. So with the outer circle selected here in the hierarchy, I'm just going to hit Control D and make a copy of it. And I'm going to name this circle, circle inner. And you'll see it's offset. So there's just a few settings we're going to tweak on here. It should have carried over most of the settings we had already, but you'll notice here it made it 50 for some reason. So we're going to switch that to 0, tab 0, and now we're centered. And it's exactly right on top of the other one. So what we're going to do here is on the size, we're going to make it a little smaller. So we're going to go 90, tab 90. And see how we have a circle in a circle there? And again, you could just leave it like that if you want, but you can just play around with these, adjusting these settings and getting it however you want to like it. So everything else is pretty much the default. I'm just going to play around with this tint here. And here on the gray, I'm going to increase it a little bit. And then I'm going to drop the alpha just a little bit there too. And we'll just go OK. And like I said, you can just adjust these values however you want. And on the width, you can leave it at 2, or like I said, you can play around with adjusting these. I'm going to drop this down to 1.5. And on the outline, double click here. I'm just going to boost the alpha to 2 and go OK. And that is it. And like I said, feel free to experiment and play around with all these values. So this honestly is one of the more technical parts of it, just creating this custom widget here. But it's really super cool. Okay, so with our widget now created, I'm just going to go ahead and compile and save those changes. And we'll come back here to finish this up as one of the last things that we do. Now I'm just going to go back into the content folder level here. I'm going to right click, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a blueprint class, but this time we're going to create a game mode base. And just like it says here, the game mode base defines the game being played, its rules, its scoring, and other facets of the game type. And we can also hold game logic components in it, such as timers and all other kinds of logic that we want. It's a lot better to put it in here than within your blueprint third person. I'll just call it my game mode base, and we'll just go ahead and double click into it. And it's a blueprint just like any other, and we'll just go ahead and dock it up here. Now everything we're going to do is just going to be in the event graph here, and you'll notice in here it's just like a regular blueprint, and it has an event begin play and an event tick. We don't need an event tick, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. One thing that we're going to need is we are going to need a variable to hold our timer value. So I'm just going to click here, and I'm just going to call this time remaining value, and we're going to set this as an integer, and it can remain private. And I'll just go ahead and compile and save that. And since this is our time remaining, I'm just going to go ahead and set it to 30, like that. So that's set. And the rest of this is pretty straightforward. It's all just blueprint visual scripting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a sequence node. So I'm going to right click and get a sequence node here, right there. We're just going to plug this in there like that. And there's just a couple things we wanted to do. The first thing is we want to, when the game starts, we want to add a widget. So I'm just going to pull this off here, and I'm going to go create widget. You've probably seen this done 100 times before. And we're just going to tie this to our widget blueprint timer that we just created. The owning player is going to be the player controller. So I'm going to right click and get player controller right here. And this can just pop in there like that. And then we're going to add this to the viewport. So add to viewport, oops, add to viewport right here like that. And that's all wired in and good to go. And we're done with that. Now the next thing in our, I'm going to just pull this out of the way here a little bit more. I did a tutorial not too long ago about set timer by event, and this is a really handy bit of functionality to know. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description. But let's just pull off of here, and we're going to get set timer by event here. And this creates its own separate time thread in a way. It's almost like a concurrency function where it's running its own thread based on whatever we plug into it. So it wants an event to control by time. So we're going to create a custom event to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and we're going to go add custom event right here. We'll just leave it called custom event, and that will be our event. We just plug that in there. And this is essentially the, down here on our timer, we can set this at 1 second. So it's going to be looping every second. So it's creating almost a 1 second timer. So we'll just go loop, and so it's looping every second. And then if we want, for future reference, to have access to the timer and the things that it does, we can right click here and promote this to a variable. And we can call this, really honestly, if I click F2 here, I can call it timer reference, because that's really what it is. It's a reference to our timer, and that gives us ways to access things that this timer can do. So it's just essentially a reference to this timer. Okay, now down here we're going to create a little bit of logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press B, and we're going to create a branch node. And essentially this is our timer that we're building right now. So we have our time remaining value over here. As long as this doesn't fall below 0, then we want our timer to keep looping in 1 second. But once it gets to 0, we want the timer to stop and the game to quit. So here, off of here, I'm going to, that's our test condition. I'm going to search for less than equal to right here. And that's going to be our 30 seconds. And that's our condition. As long as we're not at 0, keep looping, essentially, right? We're going to keep calling this as true. So here we're going to print a string just to keep track of our program flow, and this is simply just going to say game over. And this could, in terms of a game, this could be anything that you wanted it to be. I'm just going to set that to 12 seconds, so it's on the screen a little while. And now what we need to do is every time that this loops through, if we still have time remaining, we want to subtract 1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab this here. I need a get and a set for this, so I need a set, and this is going to be subtract here. Subtract 1, and then this just plugs into here like this, and our false comes down here like that, and that's all that this needs to do. I did a tutorial about a macro, and this essentially could be a macro. You could collapse this functionality if you wanted to. So this is basically our countdown, because every time it loops through, we're taking 1 off of our remaining time. And then the last thing is when we run out of time, and this is true, then we just want to quit the game. So I'll just pull off of here and go quit game like that. And that's all we need to do. That's our entire logic there. I'll put that on the screen if you want to take a screenshot of that. And we'll compile and save this. The only thing that we have left to do now is create a function to update our blueprint timer here. So I'm going to jump back into my widget blueprint. We're going to select here on the text, and I'll come over here where it says text and see where it says bind, and we're going to go create binding here. And this is one thing that's cool about this setup, is that I've done tutorials about this, and we go back and forth on this. Is casting good or evil? And honestly, the only downside to casting is sometimes the amount of memory that it can take up. But casting isn't always bad, especially if you're casting to something that's not a very big asset to begin with. So if we cast to our game mode base instead of the blueprint third person, we're actually not putting that much memory strain on our system. So casting is not always bad. I think it gets a bad rap sometimes. So I'm going to disconnect this. I press Alt and left click, and we're going to cast to my game mode base. So I'm going to right click, cast to my game mode base here, and we're going to plug this in here. The object is our game mode, so I'm going to right click and go get game mode right here, and this plugs in here. Now this creates a reference to our game mode base, and I can get, let me compile and save that. I can get access to that time remaining value that I need actually. So I'm going to drag off of here, and I'm just going to search for time remaining here. And then we're just going to pop this into here, and it'll auto convert, and we'll pop this in there like that. Compile and save. And that's it for that. So we're pretty much done. The only thing I need to do now is I need to go into world settings and adjust our game mode base. So I'm going to come up to window, I'm going to go to world settings, and I'm going to come to game mode override, and we're going to select my game mode base that we built, and then we're going to click this little arrow here. And for our pawn class, we're going to choose our BP third person character. And we'll save that. When I hit play, if everything is right, we should see a timer appear in the top center of the screen. It'll count down to 30, and the game will end. So let's see if that's what happens. Looks like it's working. And like I said, on this user widget, you could redesign this in any way that you want. I just have this, I kind of like the two circles inside of each other, but you might like something that looks a little bit different. But essentially it gets the job done, and it looks better than just the number being there by itself. And so when we get to 0, that should be the end of the game. Yep, game over. Okay, that is pretty much it. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Take care, have a great day, and I will talk to you next time.